we do that.
Well, I'm down in the basement now, and several days have passed, and we've got the bed of the lathe mounted onto the base, and I carried this down into the basement using this pipe, as I spoke of earlier in the last video, and that greatly expedited things, made it an awful lot easier to handle, although the bed was not nearly as heavy as I anticipated, and now I'm estimating it probably only weighs about 125 pounds. But having handles on it is certainly makes it easier, and it would make it even easier if it was a very heavy, large lathe. I've also spent countless hours cleaning the machine and the various parts, getting the chips out of there and the grease off of it, so it'll be easier to reassemble. And I did not paint this. I'm not one that likes to paint, so it's going to be original, but it's a lot cleaner. And now let's start putting it together. The first thing I'm going to do is to mount the headstock. And whenever you reassemble something where there's an engine or a machine or whatever, it must be absolutely clean. And I've cleaned this I don't know how many times. That's a brand clean towel. And I like to feel it with my hands to make sure there's no grit on there. And also I will clean this repeatedly, and then don't lay it down on a board or anything. You know, that surface should be immediately placed onto the ways, and I'm going to use whey oil on the surfaces that are which will be right here and here, and I'm going to spread it around real good, and I'm also going to put it on these surfaces right here. But this and this is what matters the most right now. When I disassembled the lathe, remember I had made a little scribe mark here, and that was still visible, and I brought the headstock into position right on that scribe line, because this can be moved back and forth just a little bit. And there are the clamps all cleaned up and ready to go, and those will be screwed underneath off camera, because that's kind of laborious and I need some real thin wrenches to do that, which I've already laid aside. Now, with my trusty instant Sanka coffee can as my helper, because I do work alone if possible, I will put a couple bolts into the quick change gearbox. And I will tighten those up off camera. As a side note, get yourself one of these Rubbermaid utility carts, or a metal one, or whoever makes one, but they are the handiest thing to have around a shop, and I have several of them. Now, before I put the saddle on, what I'm going to do, or what I have already done, is to loosen this screw and this screw, and as I flip this over, you're going to see why. The two screws that I just loosened tighten or loosen this piece, and this goes underneath the bed and keeps the saddle from lifting up. And on this side, which I haven't showed you before, is a similar piece that is screwed on like that. And before, I just had loosened that up and I slid the whole assembly off of the bed, but I'm going to take it off this time, all the way off. And this has already been cleaned, these surfaces here. And I wish I had new whey wipers, but I do not. And that's been cleaned real well. This is the carriage lock, upside down of course. And again, trusty whey oil. Now if you don't have whey oil, just use some good 20 weight. And I will rub that in real good, real well, I should say. and also on this surface. This whey oil is a little bit more sticky and stringy than regular oil. You don't need a lot of it, but you ought to have that. Plus oil wherever we have mating parts. And now I will install the saddle. And next I will put this part clear around the back underneath with oil on it and tighten it, and then I will also tighten these two screws, and again those pieces ride underneath the bed, and that's a part that is seldom lubricated because it's out of sight and out of mind, but you need oil down there as well as on top of the ways. I am now tightening the two bolts that hold this piece on. And at this time I'm only going to snug them just to see how the fit is later on, and do I need to shim them. And also I will snug up these two screws that we just talked about. One here and one on the other side. Now I'm also using whey oil on the ways wherever the saddle rides, and then I'm checking the fit. And it's moving just right. Now the purpose of those pieces that I just installed and talked about is to keep the entire saddle assembly from lifting up. Now South Bend uses one here, but I don't believe that they use one underneath here, but I could be wrong on that. And this is the carriage lock, so make sure that's in the right position. And that's the incorrect bolt. I'll try to find the correct one. Now on the apron, I'm going to apply a little bit of the Shell multi-purpose grease. I think it's better than oil on these gears. So using some of that, not too much to where I make a mess, because it's going to move around as the gears move. But I'll get some of these on all of the gears. I'll do that off camera. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here and a little bit here on the half nut lever, and a little bit here where those two surfaces mate. And the half nut lever slides up and down here, so I'd like a little bit of oil in there. And that'll work its way down. Possibly a little bit here. Next, the apron goes on, and remember that we got a keyway here that has to align with the key in this piece, so that's one consideration. I like to put a little oil here, and I'm going to put some of the full length of the lead screw here in a moment. I've already put some oil here, and the gears are greased. I took off the thread chasing dial and the carriage clamp for the moment, just to get them out of the way. So let's have a go at it. Gotta take the can out of there. Okay, the key is lined up. Oh. Just a little bit of struggle. I got an interference here with something. Okay, it was the carriage hand wheel. That wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Okay, and I'll snug those up. I'll tighten up these two cap screws. That feels just about perfect. I installed the carriage lock off camera, and here's the thread chasing dial. I'll just snug that up, and it will not be engaged to the lead screw. It should only be engaged to the lead screw when you're threading. And on this end of the lead screw, the bearing support, and I've already oiled that. And I'll tighten those up with a socket. A little oil. And the collar. And you want to make sure there's no end play here before you tighten that up. And I'll snug it up good. Okay, we're done on that end. There's a couple places to oil here on the half nut lever shaft. And this type of oil can works best with this nozzle for these ball type of oilers. Wipe up the extra, and then I have to oil, of course, the dovetails here, and I'll do that off camera because that's shown in several of my other videos. Next comes the motor and drive, and this is the heaviest part of the entire lathe besides the actual bed. This thing weighs a ton. So that of course bolts up behind the headstock. It's kind of a tight fit back here, but here's the larger pulley. It has two steps on it, and that uses a V-belt up to the motor, the Craftsman half-horse motor, and then a flat belt, of course, is going to run from these pulleys over to the headstock. And just a series of 4 bolts down in here that aren't going to show up very well, that need to be tapped into place, and a nut on the bottom. On goes a brand new 41-inch V-belt. I think I need to do some rewiring down here eventually. Make sure that doesn't touch the pulley. And on goes the leather belt, and this certainly has seen better days. Still got the original cat gut. Alright, and I do intend to make a new belt out of this, so I'm going to show how a belt is laced in a future video, so watch for that. Next, the belt guard. Just 2 bolts for that, and I'll tighten them off camera. Now when I bring these gears up to mesh, notice that I don't force them together. There should be a little bit of play between the two of them, but not too much. And there is a specification for that you can look up. So they're all the way against each other, and I'm going to back them just a little bit. And then these gears need to be oiled. Preferably with some gear oil, but machine oil will work too. Now if you want to save wear and tear on the gears, you can also drop the banjo down a little bit and also keep this in neutral. That disengages the entire gear train, including the quick change gearbox and lead screw. Last but not least comes the tailstock, and that's been cleaned, and I'm examining in here for wear because I have considerable wear on some of my other lathes, and I do have a little bit of a discrepancy there. So this is worn, but I would say still going to be okay. And a little too heavy on the oil there. This is whey oil again. And we're ready to put it on. We got plenty of oil underneath it. This open belt here, the open pulleys, are a little bit of a concern for me, but back in the olden days it was every man for himself. No OSHA and no nanny state. Watch your fingers, you are responsible for them, no one else. And I'm not worried about myself, I'm more worried about my grandson and other people that might use this lathe. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, ready to go. I really need to rewire. There's no ground on it, and I do not like the switch because there is no reversing switch or drum switch. It's just a little cheap switch with a fuse in it. Runs fairly quiet. I think there's just a little bit of problem with the motor as far as the bearings. And I think I got myself a pretty decent lathe here. I like this knockout bar that somebody made to knock the centers out. It's brass on this end, and even went to the extra effort of putting a plastic handle on it. So that's all ready to go when I need to knock the centers out. And that's it for the reassembly of the Logan lathe. This is Tubalcain saying so long for now.